Now this particular slide talks about the HVAC equipment selection aspect. Well, when we say HVAC selection, of course I'm talking about the equipment or the accessories or the components which we require to select. Say for example, let us take example of an air handling unit. As I told you, the internal air handling unit can be kept internal, air handling unit can be kept external also. But when we think of the material or the air handling unit location, we need to always think of a long term. And keeping the air handling unit external should be the last option we should think of. The reason is that whenever we install any equipment on offshore platform, we need to think of the life or longevity of the equipment. It should go because to replace equipment is going to cost almost equal or more than the cost of an equipment. So the longer the equipment runs, better it is. So it is always advised to have an AHU inside the enclosed space because if its AHU is kept outside as per certain standards like a Shell DEP, if the AHU or any fan is outside, irrespective of the hazardous area is there or not, we have to keep or we have to maintain it as or we have to this particular it has to be certified for the zone 1. So this is also very critical aspect as far as the costing is also concerned. So better to have an enclosed room and have it inside the room on safer side. If it goes inside, your material becomes a GI. If it goes outside, your material becomes a SS. So again, the cost difference is also substantial. So better to have it inside. And when it is inside, the coil material has to be a copper aluminum. If it is outside, it has to be a copper with a Harrisite coating. Harrisite coating is a coating which protects the cooling coil and the fins from the corrosion because the fins are copper aluminum, still they are susceptible to the corrosion due to saline environment outside. Then let us talk about the chiller. Chillers are normally two, that is water cooled and air cooled. Normally air cooled chillers are avoided. The reason is simple. The reason is that air cooled, as you know, acquires more footprint as compared to water cooled. So water cooled is being given first option, but in case the water cooled facility is not available, say for example there are standalone platforms. There are platforms which doesn't have an accommodation. It consists of only electrical room. So in that case, water provision is not there because there is no water required for anything. So in that case, the last option prevails is the air cooled system. So in that case, they go with for large capacity air cooled chiller, or mostly they see that air cooled condensing unit and the AHU arrangement is provided. If you are not aware of what I am talking about, the chiller air cooled condensing unit, then I suggest that first you complete our course, basics course, in that all equipments have been elaborated. So understand what the equipments are. Then you come to do this course. But for this course, the preliminary recommendation is that you should need to have at least 2 to 3 years experience in HVAC field. Then only you will understand what I am trying to say. Because in this particular course, we are not going to start the designing of heat load and all. I am not going to teach you because I expect you that you know it already. The third aspect is again the air cooled condensing unit, which is again kept externally being air cooled. We cannot keep in the room. So again, it has to be copper with Harrisite coating fins, and some standards specify that the body also has to be stainless steel also or SS316L. So it depends on standard to standard and the client to client, specification to specification. It changes. So whichever project you are working, you need to make sure that tender documents you should read it thoroughly. Because for oil and gas project, when it's awarded, the tender documents comes in a huge quantity. They are huge, so you need to study it very carefully and check not only technical but techno commercial aspect also, which can affect your budget. Then the ventilation fans also normally preferred as tube axial fans. Fire dampers, again there are various types of fire dampers. So those fire damper types I will cover it up in the subsequent lectures because it's a very important one of the components, and it cannot be covered in 1 or 2 minutes. It's a huge session required for that. So I will cover it up in the next subsequent sessions. Then volume control dampers we are aware of. Normally in oil and gas sector, the heavy duty volume control dampers are used. The thickness of the volume control dampers is normally more. It's normally 2 to 3 mm we keep due to offshore requirement. Then there are air terminal units. Air terminal units also you have diffusers, you have grills. Then you have the sound attenuated plenum boxes to minimize the sound levels. So though these all things I will cover up in subsequent lectures. Then there's the E&I VFD panels for the HVAC, that is electrical instrumentation requirement, variable frequency drive requirement for the HVAC, then piping ducting requirement also changes from project to project, client to client specifications. Of course, what are the specifications I will be covering up in subsequent, because these are the basics, so I'm covering only the basic aspects of it. So hope you liked it. So let's go to the next slide. Now let's move on to the new slide. Roles and classification of the standard. Well, we can talk very much detail about the role and classification standard, because this is very important topic again. Because as I already told you that when the project comes, we need to follow a certain standard which is defined by a client, or the type of ship or type of the offshore platform it is. We need to follow certain classification standard, because the approval engineer comes from this body, and he class engineer comes and he checks your all the drawings and construction, and gives you the approval that you have done the work as per the standard. So without that you won't get the certification, and unless you get the certification, your insurance and all doesn't have any value. So there are certain bodies over there. There is International Association of Classification Body. It is ISCS, then ABS, that is American Bureau of Shipping is there. Then RENA is there, that is Royal Institute of Naval Architects. SOLAS is again very important standard. NORSOC is again an important standard. DNV is important standard. BV is there. IR class is there. So these are the some standards which I will be covering in subsequent session. But just to have an idea, this is what the standards which we need to be aware of while designing the HVAC system.